Are you going to a game this weekend?
No, I'm gonna soak them all in.
Okay, good. All right. Well, then
I sometimes like those.
Stuff.
I love going to games, and I love like working a stadium and the sideline and all that different stuff. But then sometimes when I'm home and I know a lot of coaches in the postseason are watching, but they're out of the postseason, those test exchange, right, are always super fun because they watch the game obviously better than we do. I love hearing their point of view going like, hey, this is such as I'm like, oh, wow. Oh, welcome into a Monster Wednesday edition of Scoop City. I'm James Palmer. Don't forget to like and subscribe because there is a lot coming your way from the Athletic senior NFL insider, Dianna Russini. She's got it all. She's got the goods, and we're going to break it all down for you today. We're also going to have Dan Duggan joining us, talking about the Giants side of things. Where is their head coaching search now that John Harbaugh is available? John Harbaugh is available because he has been fired by the Ravens. We'll talk to Dianna about everything that transpired in Baltimore and what's next for Harbaugh, as well as Jeff Zrebiec will join us, who covers the Ravens brilliantly for us, and he'll give us his angle as well about what is next in Baltimore. Dianna, you're working the phones now. You've been never stopped. Those fingers are probably raw by now, because you've always been a single index finger typer.
It's unbelievable, right? It's like it's not a secret that I do because nobody cares, but I do find it very concerning that I'm not a better texter when that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But
you send text fast. I get them fast from you.
I'm a great responder. I'm a bad texter. Okay. Right? Like, you have to kind of speak Dianna. Like, you're going to get bad spellings, horrible grammar. Sometimes I actually do reflect on some of the things I write to people over text. I'm like, I wonder if they're like, how is this woman a writer for The Athletic? But somehow I'm just better on a keyboard.
Text is different. You're better on a keyboard. I get it. There was a period of time back in the day when Von Miller played for the Broncos that he only responded to my text messages with emojis, and I had to decode like what he was trying to send me in anything. There was never a letter. It was just different things, and he loved doing it. Like, figure this out, JP, and it'd be just like nonsense.
That's
and I'd have
funny.
to figure out what Vaughn was kind of sending me. Okay.
I had a story, James, years ago where this was like the Washington days, and it was between Robert Griffin III and Kirk Cousins, and we didn't know who was going to start. Mm-hmm. And one of the players was like, "Man, I'm not leaking that. You know, like you'll just have to wait." I'm like, "You don't have to like text it to me. Just send me like an emoji." Which I don't know why that worked, but he's like, "Oh, good call." So he sent me a fireball, and I'm like, does that mean Robert or Kirk? Robert, like it was. And so I sent back question mark, and he sent me a funny emoji, and I was able to figure it out that it was Kirk.
Oh God. I guess, the fireball might be, we're blowing it up here.
Yeah, I know. There's so many ways. No emojis. We're a no emoji zone
guys.
show.
Come on. Yeah, we're not doing emojis. Even if the man himself, John Harbaugh, put an emoji in his statement as he was departing from the Baltimore Ravens. See how that all fit together?
Wow.
John Harbaugh
was very good, right? James.
I appreciate that. Good transition, JP. John Harbaugh let go by owner Steve Bisciotti, and we're going to make this crystal clear for you listening that this was not a mutual parting of the ways. That's very easy to see from both the Ravens statement and John Harbaugh's statement. This was that the owner, Steve Bisciotti, has decided to move on from John Harbaugh after 18 seasons and now is looking for a new head coach. I do think quickly, even though this happened yesterday and we're speaking Wednesday afternoon, Dianna, the way this transpired to me is fascinating. What can you glean on kind of how this went down? Because a lot of people that should know did not know when it happened.
Yeah, people in the building did not know because they were told by John Harbaugh that they were going to be okay. Yep. There was an understanding all day on Tuesday that Todd Monken and Zach Orr and John Harbaugh were all going to return, and everyone felt really good about where things were at because Monday night there was a meeting held and conversations were had where everyone just went to bed thinking, all right, like time to turn the page, the next chapter begins. And meantime, while that was happening, ownership was making calls to a lot of different people in the Ravens organization, people on the staff, players, to just try to get an idea of what's been going on. What are some of the problems? What are things we like? What are some things we don't like? And when Steve Bisciotti sat down with John Harbaugh, and from what I understand, this wasn't some marathon meeting. You know, sometimes you hear these meetings take like hours and they're stressful and they take lunch breaks. Like, it wasn't that long of a meeting. It was a pretty understood decision made by Bisciotti that he wants to go in a different direction, that he felt it was time. And a lot of this has connections to the way this offense was going, to Lamar Jackson, to what they wanted the future to be. And there's also a part of this where some people there just felt like change was needed. So I almost think it's a bit of a storm of a lot of different factors. Mm-hmm. And you have perspectives from players, you have perspectives from the coaches, you have perspective from John and from ownership here. And so hopefully we're going to be able to touch on all sides here to get the full story.
Yeah, that's the fascinating part. And to really take you inside that room, Diana's exactly right about how it transpired. And then my understanding is that, like, some people in other buildings around the NFL knew before the vast majority of the people within the Ravens organization knew, which is a fascinating way for it to spread through media outlets and different ways that the information
it spread
got out
like
there.
Wildfire quickly. And the decision makers at the top of Baltimore obviously knew immediately. But the rest of the staff was not informed until later. So then you have to figure, between agents and just conversations with other teams, and then the beginning of the next chapter of this, who's going to be the next coach, things were just moving quick. Mm-hmm. So from what I understand, that's kind of why that happened. And then you have just the reaction today. And I think we talked last show, what was the biggest stunner? At the time, it was Raheem, right? Like, this was a stunner just because I don't think anyone really truly expected the Ravens to fire John Harbaugh. It would be more like John needed to hang it up or step aside for a little bit, or
it's just
maybe
time.
Make some changes on the staff. But there's a lot to this. And this has been a complicated year for Baltimore with things that involved the health of Lamar Jackson. Obviously, we a lot of people read the story from the Baltimore Sun on some of the things that that been going on behind the scenes about Lamar. And I'm actually currently working on just trying to get an idea of what really happened in the locker room with the players, not so much the coaching staff, of how they see it. And even just having a few conversations before we hopped on here. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to find someone that does not love Lamar Jackson in that locker room. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of his habits have been discussed publicly about, like, and if you haven't heard before, there are some people who don't believe that he cares for himself the way we've heard about, like, a Tom Brady before, and the way we've seen in a lot of those quarterback documentaries that Netflix did, where you see Kirk Cousins grinding and going through all these different things to stay young and stay fit. And from what I understand, like, Lamar definitely is not one of these, like, I must take care of everything and my health kind of people. He's a natural athlete. But in terms of his focus for the game, there's a lot of things that he does and a lot of things that he says quietly to lead that locker room, to make them know, like, look, this is how things go. James, you've been in the Chiefs locker room before, and, like, Patrick has got the best grip of any quarterback currently, probably, of any locker room, right? Like,
that's true.
Patrick's not walking around talking to every player. He doesn't do that. He doesn't have to do that anymore, right? It's like, he's Patrick Mahomes, and he leads by example, and you just respect what he does, and you stay in line because he's Patrick Mahomes. Lamar's a little bit more interactive with guys. He hangs out, he talks. There's, like, couches in the middle of the Ravens locker room. Like, he's been seen there tons of time talking to rookies. Like, he's really involved with his teammates and likes them, and they like him. And I think a lot of the problems this year really stem from some differences between him, how he wanted the offense to be with Todd Monken. It's not like Todd isn't like this super player coach. He's really bright and really smart with offenses. And I think there may have been a little rub there that it wasn't all coming together the way they wanted it to come together on offense specifically.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I love that you took us inside that locker room. I'll do the same thing, talking to players and talking to former players that have been there. There's a way that Steve Bisciotti does this, right, Diana? He is very trusted. It's why it's one of the best organizations in sports. And I'll get to that. And we'll get to that in terms of this job as an opening. But the way that I'm always told by players is that he is very good at quietly going around. He doesn't meddle. He lets the people he's hired do their jobs, certainly. But he is very good at going and having conversations with different people in the building, players specifically. Hey, what's kind of, shoot me straight. What's the vibe right now? What's the feeling in the locker room? That had been going on, to my understanding, for some time. So when we all say that this is also, and I want to clarify this, some people come out and report that, we all should have saw this coming. This is because for a while, Steve Bisciotti's been doing blank, blank, blank. He keeps all of that, though, to himself. He gathers all of that information. He puts it all together for himself, and he comes to a conclusion. So yes, he's been working behind the scenes, to my understanding, for some time about what's going on, what's the feel. He's very good at getting that information very quietly, and then again, keeping it to himself. And again, probably exactly why Dianna reported, it wasn't the longest meeting. He had come to a conclusion about what he wanted to do moving forward with John Harbaugh. Before we get to John, Dianna, I wanted to talk about this job specifically. You mentioned Lamar and the type of player he is. That player does not come along very often. That is a unicorn type player. That is a 2-time MVP. That is a big part of why this job is very, very appealing. But I heard from an executive on another team yesterday after Harbaugh was let go, and it said, this is the best run organization in all of professional sports. That's the way other teams think of the Ravens, from the way they treat their employees, to the facilities, to the general manager, everything that is in there from owner Steve Bisciotti. How coveted is this job, and when's the last time we saw a job like this, Dianna, available, that's this really has the ability to check almost every box?
A couple items on that. First, just the fact that John Harbaugh's name is in this cycle just absolutely knocked down the dominoes in multiple markets, in multiple organizations, and directions that teams were going shifted. There were tons of discussions with teams going on as late as 10:30 Eastern last night, from teams that have a candidate list that were zeroing in already, even before the interviews, kind of just knowing the direction they want to go in. And then John hops in on this, and it's, okay, now, not even now what, but what are we going to do to make sure that this is the place he wants to be? We've talked on the show so much about there's no Ben Johnson in this cycle. There's no Mike Vrabel. Like, well, we got him, but we got the golden goose now. And look, Kevin Stefanski's also another big name out there. Like, it's like we forgot that happened. By the way, that happened 2 days ago. Yep. It feels like 50 years ago. But Stefanski met with the New York Giants for dinner last night. He's meeting with them currently at this moment. We'll see what shakes there. But from what I understand, Harbaugh really likes the Giants. They really like him. There's going to be a meeting, an interview set up. They're hoping for the weekend, if not early next week, to get him in the building, because they're basically clearing the decks. Like, we got Stefanski, now let's get him here. So he's gonna have his choice.
Is he for everyone? Honestly.
So before we hopped on this show, I was talking to a very popular and accomplished player about the future in the coaching position. Just, what do guys like? What do they want? And he made a good point that you're seeing a lot of the successful teams have a former player energy to it versus the old school teacher. Like, let's just use Sean Payton as the example of the old school teacher. Even though Sean played in college, though, didn't he? Didn't he play like
Eastern Illinois, baby,
D7?
Quarterback. Eastern Illinois quarterback, same as I believe Tony Romo.
Okay, but no one around the league is going, oh my gosh, Sean Payton was an incredible.
And I think Jimmy G went there too. Yeah, quarterback U, Eastern Illinois, actually. Quarterback U.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now you look at some of the guys now that are having success, right? Like D'Amico, right? Like, you don't question anything D'Amico does, because he knows, he gets it, he connects. Dan Campbell connects. Mike Vrabel connects. So his point, look, this is just like fodder. This isn't like me reporting. It's just, I do think players like that better. I think it's quicker to establish yourself when the leader standing up in front is someone that has been close to the game and understands it. John's been around the game and respected for years. He was in one place for 18 years. He's 62 though, right? Like, he's not young. He's still energetic, and he's still a great leader, and he's kind. That is something, players will always say. He's a thoughtful person. But But yeah, like I still think he aligns with the type of coach owners want, right? Because he's going to be no muss, no fuss. Think about the New York Giants. They need a name. They need someone to come in here and fix whatever this happened because they've got a darn good roster. And I think you clean up a lot of this if you get the right guy in there. It all goes away. And then they can get this thing on the right track. By the way, this same player said to me, he's like, watch, Jackson Dart with John Harbaugh is going to have the same type of path that Drake May did this year. Like, he's just going to take off. So we'll see. We'll stay tuned.
I don't want to be rude to John Harbaugh. He has had Lamar Jackson for two MVP seasons. He doesn't call the plays. He doesn't run the offense. Why would John Harbaugh specifically get Jackson Dart to there when everybody says, yes, Mike Vrabel has played a very big role with this? And if you talk to people in New England, they'll tell you that. But Josh McDaniels, has a massive, massive role in what's happened with Drake May. Why do people feel that way about John Harbaugh doing that for Jackson Dart?
So I think the part that we're going to find out very soon here is who's John going to bring at the OC position. It's got to be the first question, especially in New York. Right? Like we've got the guy we believe in who's going to be calling plays here. And from what I understand, I don't think it was perfect with Todd Monken in terms of them, but I know he wants to keep him around. He wants to stick with him. So we'll see if that's going to be part of the interview process as Todd being the OC, or if perhaps he goes in a different direction. But if I had to just guess right now, I think he sticks with Todd Monken. Look, I think at the end of the day, for his history has proven it's why he's getting all these interviews. It's why teams that currently have a head coach are having their either ownership group, people connected to it, or their general managers reach out to Harbaugh's people to see to gauge his interest. I had a team last night text me, do you think Harbaugh would want us? Think about that, right? Like, they're so worried that they don't want to reach out and get denied.
That is John Harbaugh's agent working overtime and crushing it, honestly, because he's created this. Like, hey, other teams are interested that have coaches, right, Dianna? So then other teams are texting you, texting other people going, well, do you think he'd like us?
I was thinking about this when I fell asleep last night. Only in this sport, I feel like, or not only in sports, is the person dumped all of a sudden, it almost is better for your image when you get fired than if you do it any other way. Yeah. Right? Like, if you want to go down and in the NFL, go down kicking and screaming because you're going to come right back up on top. But for a short period of time until the next person, like Raheem, no one's talking about Raheem right now. I haven't really talked to a team right now.
He's got interviews, though. I mean,
who's targeting him? I don't know of anyone, right? Kevin Stefanski was the hot one for 2 days. Yeah. Now John is the hot one. And man, if you got to figure Harbaugh's probably sitting there wondering, too, what happens this weekend if one of the teams that gets bounced from the playoffs also decides to move on from one of their head coaches, and now you throw, let's say, Tomlin in the mix. Yeah. How does that shake out what's available? And that's the risk you take too if you're going to wait. So that's kind of like the John Harbaugh market conversation of this right now. I do believe he is going to try to meet with as many teams as he can. Okay. Just talking to people close to him and trying to get an idea of what's lined up. I mean, you've got Atlanta, you've got Tennessee. I'm not sure about Cleveland just yet, but you got to figure they're going to. Why wouldn't they?
Well, I would hate to be, even if you're not interested, Dianna, for the perception to your fan base. Do you want just to not interview John Harbaugh or not put in the request? Or you might put yourself in a situation where you request John Harbaugh, it becomes public, and he turns it down. That could be in play as well. Amanda, that does not look good for an organization.
Now, I did have someone with a team. They were being very delicate with their interest in Harbaugh because they don't want it out because they're not even sure if they're going to fire their coach or not. Because think about it. If you can't get them, you can't take that risk because then you're going to lose your guy. So the next few days are going to be really interesting and entertaining. I can tell you that.
That's fascinating. It shows me a couple of things. One, I really, really liked what you had to say about where John Harbaugh is and where the landscape of the NFL is right now in terms of having a lot of these coaches that played. And if you ask players all the time, I love when a coach demands something of me and I will respond to it because I know he's been through it too. If you're a running back coach and you're telling your guy to go between the tackles, come on, man, you got to do this, this, and this. The running back certainly loves hearing it from a guy who did it himself. If you're Deuce Staley, it's easier to get that message across to your particular player when they know, man, that guy put the helmet on and did it as well. And that's a big part of what's happening across the NFL as well. Until you get to that Andy Reid level or that John Harbaugh level or that Mike Tomlin level where just the respect is kind of just there. But how long does that entirely last with certain players? As I was talking to a veteran player just last night going, players have changed. And that's why you're saying this, because practices have changed. Style has changed. Everything has changed around the building. What do teams want? What do locker rooms want is listened to by some of these owners, in a sense, in how they do it. Let's try this again. What do you think about the Ravens as an opening?
Yeah.
And the boxes it checks almost every single one.
Yeah.
That's going to be an interesting hire because they went outside of the box 18 years ago when everybody said, you're hiring who? You're hiring John Harbaugh, a special teams coordinator. I think they have the ability, Dianna, to go outside the box again if they want because of how stable the structure is within that organization. What say you?
It is stable, and they have a really strong, good front office. Mm-hmm. But you also have Lamar Jackson at 28 years old, who hasn't won a Super Bowl yet. Mm-hmm. 2 MVPs, and he's obviously a running quarterback who's getting older, right? You would think that you would want someone coming in here with a very strong offensive mind and an offensive plan.
And to relate to the quarterback quickly.
To try to get this going, right? Mm-hmm. But you could also see it as, well, maybe you just bring in the kind of the guy that can establish what the Ravens are going to be now post John and get a great offensive coordinator connected with him, right? So I would expect the Ravens to reach out to Clint Kubiak in Seattle, the offensive coordinator there. I expect them to reach out to Cliff Kingsbury, who is no longer employed by the Commanders. In terms of offensive people. But then, you've got a guy like Anthony Weaver, who was loved by that organization when he was there.
Yeah, he was.
Who is getting head coaching opportunities right now. He'll be interviewing for Arizona and Atlanta over the next few days. Jesse Minter is the name that I've been hearing. I don't have any intel on it right now of what would that look like, right? But my only concern or question with the Minter part of this is Minter going to take staff from John Harbaugh's brother's team if he comes to Baltimore, right? Because then you have that weird factor in there.
I think he would.
But does Jim allow it?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, if it's a promotion, it's hard for a team to block it. If it's a lateral move, it's easier. But yes.
So we'll see over the next few hours of who they're going to be going after. And I can tell you that there were people in the front office who did not believe that Harbaugh was getting fired. So it's not like they had some plan here where they had, yes, our conversations always happening. Are there back channels going on for weeks during the season? Absolutely. But it is so much different when it becomes reality. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to just talk about this idea, but then when you are faced with, oh my goodness, I've got to go find a head coach now. And in a crop that most around the league don't really think is that spectacular.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see what direction they go in here, and we'll see how much say Lamar Jackson's going to have in it.
I know you mentioned a couple of guys that names start with K, which they should start with a C, but they start with a K, in Clint Kubiak and Cliff Kingsbury. But you didn't mention Kevin Stefanski for the Ravens. No fit?
I have not heard that one yet. I don't hate it.
I don't hate it either.
Well, let's take a look. Let's go through some of the quarterbacks Kevin has played with or coached.
We don't have a 2-hour show today, Dianna.
I was literally just thinking about. Could I name every Cleveland quarterback that Kevin? Or let's even go back to Minnesota. No, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, that's. I think you're actually asking a really good question too, because what style of offense are you looking for? What kind of style of offense does Lamar want to be in? Right? Obviously, we understand what is successful for them, but he is getting older. Do they want to open the passing game up a little bit more? The way we saw Washington trying to do, right? So it's less of a run game. Just depends on what it is that they want to do. So I would assume Baltimore is going to be reaching out to Jimmy Sexton to see if Kevin Stefanski would be interested.
I love, like, that's he runs a very similar system to Clint Kubiak. It all stems up to the Shanahan-Kubiak world, that run-first bootleg type of thing that both of them are very successful with. Lamar in the bootleg game with the threat to run is, to me, one that makes sense. But, it's going to be up to Steve Bisciotti, who I think evaluates talent very, very well, and has a very good eye for what's out there. It's going to be fascinating, Dianna. It's going to be fascinating. Do you have anything else? Empty the notebook before we let you run back to single-digiting the phone.
My plain notebook. In typical Dianna fashion, I couldn't find a pen when someone was talking before.
My pen ran out while we were talking. Yeah. You're usually writing on toilet paper.
Oh my! I was taking this like lipstick thing and using it, like the tip of the lipstick thing, to write something down before.
Very artistic.
But I got the important part out. I had said 2 weeks ago that this was going to be a coordinator-heavy cycle, and that the head coaching thing was going to be a little light. And that has changed so much. And this isn't because, and I'm obviously not the only person who said that, this isn't because the information we were getting was wrong. It's so many decision makers changed their minds, which I think blows
Preach that,
people's
Dianna,
minds.
so we don't sound wrong. So preach that, so we don't sound wrong.
But I think people think that that's how that works. Like, there's like, if I was a fan, I would say the same thing. Like, you're telling me a billionaire who's had so much success to become a billionaire has no plan? Like,
well, I'll say this, because this was said to me last night. Where did they make their billions? Somewhere else or football? Somewhere else. Almost all of them made it in some other form of business.
And it doesn't carry over. It's not the same thing. Like we said before, it's the only place where you get fired and things get better for you.
Yeah.
So look, Monday was busy. I just think this is going to keep getting busier because so much still needs to happen. And I do think there's teams out there waiting to see what happens in this weekend's games. I think we're going to be on Scoop City on Monday, fired up about whatever games that we loved watching, discussing that with Chase. But I'm going to bet you we'll be leading the show with new coaching information.
I'm so excited. I'm not excited for people to get to lose their jobs. You know what I'm saying? But
no,
it's just like fascinating
change.
to watch.
I like
change.
You like change. So with that, really quickly before I hop off, are you going to a game this weekend?
No, I'm gonna soak them all in.
Okay, good. All right. Well, then
I sometimes like this. I love going to games, and I love working a stadium and the sideline and all that different stuff. But then sometimes when I'm home and I know a lot of coaches in the postseason are watching, but they're out of the postseason, those test exchange, right, are always super fun because they watch the game obviously better than we do. I love hearing their point of view going like, hey, this is such as I'm like, oh, wow. And you could do that with multiple games in the first week of the postseason.
I know. Do you feel like you're on an island when you cover one game? It was always my biggest gripe when I was at ESPN was I don't want to be at one game. I don't care. I want to be everywhere. And you just can't be.
Okay, go be everywhere though. How about that?
I'm going to go try to be everywhere. Emoji face, thumbs up, all of that. I will talk to you soon.
Beautiful. You're the best. Coming up, we are going to have Jeff Zrebiec is going to be joining us covering the Ravens. Obviously, has come out with a bunch of stuff. Him and Dianna have worked on a ton of stuff, putting it out there on The Athletic. He's going to join us next on Scoop City. Welcome back to Scoop City. James Palmer here with you. Jeff Zrebiec joins us. And Jeff, we've had this conversation, I feel like, multiple times throughout the year on this show. Hey, what's going to happen with John Harbaugh? And you did keep saying, to your credit, I always know that it's not going to happen until Steve Bisciotti is the one who makes the final decision. But it does always feel a little bit different this year than years past. You kind of saw some writing on the tea leaves, but I want to get to actually it happening. Do you think this was handled the right way for a guy that has been there for 18 years in John Harbaugh, the way we all found out and the way it all ended and transpired?
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I think some of it is out of their control. Once word gets out, once you start meeting with players, it's impossible to control. You can't tell anybody, don't tell your agents, don't tell your friends. Like when you start telling people, it's going to get out. I just think you could tell from it. Just felt like a real shotgun kind of thing. Like, there was no real like highlight video package thanking Harbaugh. There was no immediate statement. It took a while. It kind of leaked out through the media. John Harbaugh didn't have a chance to meet with his assistant coaches and give them the news. They got the news during a meeting with, team president Sashi Brown and general manager Eric DaCosta. I personally think John Harbaugh deserved better. Now, I think there had to be some way where you could have kind of did a joint thing, like we'll always be close in this. He's an important part of the organization, but we're moving apart amicably. But they didn't get there. And some of it may be semantics, James. Like, look, I'm sure Harbaugh wants that money. And, look, to get those, he still has 3 years left on his deal. And
now,
to get that money.
In yet? Did that kick in yet?
No, it's this year. So he has 3 full years left on that deal. Now, I imagine there's some offsets that if he gets hired elsewhere, but still, like if you resign, you don't get that. But if you get fired, you're getting that. So I'm sure that may have had something to do with the wording of it all. But yeah, I thought there would be a much more clean way to handle this than they actually did.
Yeah, everybody who's listening, please go and read what Jeff's written on The Athletic about this entire situation. Has covered it brilliantly, better than anybody else I've read out there, Jeff, in terms of how this went down and maybe the details that you have. And I know you're still digging and going to be coming up with more information about that. But what I read this morning from you was very enlightening to me, talking about the dynamic between Todd Monken, Lamar Jackson, and John Harbaugh. What can you tell us about that relationship and maybe a part that it played? And potentially maybe Lamar and the part that plays with whoever else comes in as the next head coach.
Yeah, I think people interpret that there was, I don't think the relationship between Todd Monken and John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, specifically about Monken and Lamar, I don't think it was untenable. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. They won a lot of games together. Certainly. They put up a lot of numbers. They had a working relationship, but there was always an edge there. Todd is a hard driving coach and he's brash. Every other word is usually an F-bomb and he's just a real interesting guy and he's really in your face. And, I think there were times where John Harbaugh had to kind of intercede there and be the buffer, be the good cop to Todd's bad cop, for lack of better expression. And I think that was all part of it. Lamar Jackson's a unique personality. He's not like other players. Everybody's different in a lot of ways. And I think there was always this push-pull in the relationship with Lamar and different people trying to reach him and trying to make sure he was good with everything and make sure he was kept abreast of everything they were doing and he was content. And yeah, I think that was sort of part of the awkward dynamic here. I don't think the reason why John Harbaugh is not the head football coach of the Ravens today is because of Todd Monken. I don't. Mm-hmm. But I think the whole coaching dynamic and what John was willing to do and how much he was willing to lose on that coaching staff and his vision for the team. It sounded to me, James, that John thought they would be fine with a little bit of a reset, some tweaks on the coaching staff, and the higher ups believed they needed massive change. And I don't think John Harbaugh was on board with that idea.
Okay, so that's the how this transpired. I'm kind of curious of what's next. When I talk to people, and I said this to Dianna earlier in the show, an executive texted me from another team after this move happened and said that in his mind, the Ravens are the best run organization in professional sports. And I think that's very, very high praise. But you're in that building on a daily basis. I think this job checks almost every single box that you can possibly have. When's the last time we had an opening like this in the NFL? And what do you see them doing in terms of the direction they go, Jeff?
Yeah, wow, that's a good question. When the last time there's been kind of a plum opening where you're joining a stable organization with ownership and GM on the same page and not a whole lot of dysfunction and You got an MVP quarterback, a really good roster. I mean, this isn't a rebuild situation. The coaches who just comes in here is going to expect to win. I can't recall. Yeah. I can't recall in recent years, any opportunity as good as this. And I think they'll be at the top of the list for the candidates. It'll be interesting what they do, but I think if they've only had one head coaching hiring over in so long. Like they did this with Harbaugh in 2008. And when they hired Harbaugh in 2008, they cast a pretty wide net. They looked at the college ranks. In fact, they tried to interview Kirk Ferentz from Iowa, and he kind of rebuked them. And they looked at coaches on offense and defensive side of the ball. And I think this is going to be a drawn out process. I think they're going to start quickly later this week, James. I think we'll start hearing about them requesting permission and in more hours than days, and I think they'll really get on this, but I think they're going to interview a lot of people. And Steve Bisciotti made his billions off being running and developing a staffing agency. He knows what he's looking for. He knows the whole process of interviewing and all that. They'll be on the same page on all this. They'll know what they want to hear, what they're looking for. I imagine they'll kind of do the Zoom thing early, then bring in a smaller group of candidates and go from there. But it'll be interesting. I don't think people should expect like a conventional hire necessarily. I mean, I think Steve Bisciotti has proven he's not afraid to go unconventional. And maybe kind of the guys most connected to it now may not be the guys that we wind up seeing as the finalists.
That's a great point. I got a text last night. I'm talking to people going, hey, about this job. I was trying to answer the same question I asked you. That's why I asked you. When was the last time we saw a job like this come available? And it was brought up to me that was very interesting, Jeff, was, they went outside the box with John when they hired him, and he was a special teams guy. I wouldn't be surprised, and this is from another team, I wouldn't be surprised if they went outside the box again. And I thought it was interesting that they added, because of the stability and the structure and everything else we mentioned, allows them maybe to take that risk that other places can't. Do you know anything in terms of, oftentimes when you change head coaches, teams look for the opposite or the adverse in some capacities, right? Do you know anything in terms of traits that you would think Steve Bisciotti would be looking for? I know they could come from anywhere, and I think that was a great point you made, but any sort of traits that candidate they would be looking for to have in terms of who could fill that job?
We were always told with Steve that he really appreciates the CEO type coach, right? Okay. The culture builder, the guy that's going to have really good communication with players and be in collaboration. This is a team. The Ravens have a decision-making process that involves Steve, Sashi Brown, Eric DaCosta, and the head coach needs to be part of that. So there needs to be a collaboration. I think some of the complaints about Harbaugh over the years, James, was beyond special teams. He never was an offensive coordinator. He never was a defensive coordinator. So I'm interested to see if Steve's view has gotten that same feedback. And Steve's view is we need an offensive guy or a defensive guy. And if we get that defensive guy, we need a hotshot offensive coordinator, grow and develop with Lamar Jackson. But I think a lot of it comes down to Lamar Jackson, James. I think you need to find a coach that's going to develop a great rapport with him, not afraid to coach him hard, but also know how to kind of meet Lamar and understand Lamar and get the best out of the quarterback. So it'll be interesting. I mean, look, Jesse Minter's the name I hear the most.
Me too.
I've had so many people reach out to me and say, that's easy. Come on, that makes too much sense. But I mean, that's a little awkward in a sense too, James, because John Harbaugh brought him to the NFL, and you're taking him off Jim Harbaugh's staff. So, is that what they want to do? Is that Jesse's going to get a job? I think we all believe that, but is that the best situation for him? You may have some longtime Ravens assistants who are still there who have worked with Jesse. I did hear something interesting though last night, James. I heard Jesse and Lamar have a pretty good relationship from the time when Jesse was here. So there will be some familiarity there. I don't know that they're really close. He was a defensive assistant and Lamar a quarterback, but I think they know each other. I think he's well aware of Jesse. So that makes it interesting. But I don't think they're going to be wedded. We need to get an offensive guy or we need to get a defensive guy. I don't think that's going to be a deal breaker either way. They're going to try to get the best guy for the job.
Okay, I get that. Hey, Lamar has that type of personality. He can become friends with anybody in the building, you know? He could be on the defensive side of the ball. That's the way Lamar operates. And I've heard similar things about Jesse as well. I mean, I spent some time with the Chargers this past week, who they just think he is a star, Jeff. So we'll see what happens with Jesse. I have one more question on Lamar, because this is something that we did kind of see this season. And I'm kind of curious if you can glean any light onto what we saw with Lamar this year and what we saw in the number of injuries. And there's probably going to be a contract negotiation this offseason, you would think, as they kind of dabbled in it last year, to my understanding. So what's next for Lamar? I don't see him playing elsewhere, but I also don't see this being like the smoothest offseason in terms of negotiations as well. I could be wrong. And then how that coach relates to him, in my head, I'm going, well, a former quarterback or a former player always can work, but at the same time, sometimes that doesn't work when you have a player as talented and as unique as Lamar in the way he plays the position. What do you think Lamar's future is, and what can we see this offseason, you think, in terms of his role in all of this?
I think the Ravens are going to be focused on this head coaching process. But then the next focus, James, has to be on Lamar Jackson's contract. It just has to be. It's going to be hard for them to operate when the market opens in mid-March without, I mean, his cap hit's almost $75 million. That's untenable.
I think Deshaun has 80, I think, in this last year. Oh, my gosh.
So they need to figure that out, and that's going to have to be, right after the coach, that's going to have to be the primary focus. But as for Lamar, I think this is a huge offseason for him. And I think any chance that they traded Lamar probably went out the window with the Harbaugh stuff. And I'm not saying that it was John or Lamar. I don't believe that. But what you're selling to these head coach prospects is a chance to come in and coach Lamar Jackson. Like there's a lot of things that make the job interesting. That's 1A. Come in and work with the two-time MVP and one of the game's best players. That's one of the reasons they got Todd Monken, because he wanted to work with Lamar Jackson. So I don't, you never know. We talk about this all the time. If someone wants to offer 3 first-round picks or 2 first-rounders and a stud, you never know. They'll probably listen. But they're moving forward with Lamar Jackson. They want to figure this out. And, this is a big offseason for Lamar Jackson to get healthier. He's going to have to develop a relationship with the new coach and kind of move the organization forward. He's the face of this, James, regardless of who they hire as the coach. And it just was a shame this year. I don't think we ever really saw him healthy. You saw the moments of brilliance from Lamar, like in that fourth quarter. He kind of put on the Super Bowl cape, the Superman cape in Pittsburgh. But I think he feels like we were kind of robbed of seeing him at his best all year, just because, one, it was the health, and I don't think he was ever 100% really since the very early season. And 2, when you're not practicing regularly, I think that impacts every player in the NFL. And I do think it impacted him that he was unable to practice as much as they would have liked.
Okay, real quick, do you think anybody would want to change his play style, Jeff? Just as he gets older? Is that a discussion at all, you think?
No, I don't think so. I think you need to stick with what makes Lamar special. Now, as he gets older and maybe he's not as explosive, I think he's going to have to even develop more parts of his game even. But I think he's done that already. I think we're seeing that. I mean, there were big questions about him throwing the ball. When Todd Monken arrived, he throws the ball pretty well. I don't think that's an issue. I think, if it would be one thing, James, if I thought his injuries were a result of him getting pummeled this year, like they really weren't. Like, he had the knee to the back in the Patriots game, but that was a 4 or 5 yard RPO, and it was kind of a freak thing. So it's hard to chalk that up to Lamar's playing style. It was just some freak things this year that, kind of conspired, and he just was never able to get right.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's hope that Superman cape does turn into a Super Bowl cape for Ravens fans. Let's hope that happens. And I also always thought 1B might be the cafeteria there as the most important things that are selling this Ravens organization. I always hear from guys, it's a great cafeteria after Lamar Jackson. It's a good one to have. And I did get from Jeremy, who works on our show, 2019, the Packers job coming open and Matt LaFleur taking that. I think that was a pretty good opportunity.
That was, that's a good
job there. So I appreciate him. He's a genius when it comes to that type of stuff. And you're a genius when it comes to the Ravens. Jeff, appreciate it so much. This was an outstanding conversation. I know everybody listening and watching absolutely loved it as much as I did. So get back to work. Keep giving us all that content. Figure out, where they're headed next. I'm excited to read it.
Thanks, James. Always enjoy talking to you.
Yep, me too. Coming up, we have Dan Duggan joining us. What's going to happen in terms of the Giants? Are they interested in John Harbaugh? Are they interested in Kevin Stefanski? We'll get to that next on Scoop City. All right, welcome back to Scoop City. I'm James Palmer. Very special guest here. Dan Duggan joins us, covers the Giants better than really anybody I know. And I know a lot of people that cover the Giants, Dan. I'm not going to lie. Your initial thoughts, and we are taping this at 11:30 Eastern on Wednesday, so anything can change. But right now, your initial thought when you saw that John Harbaugh was made available after getting fired in Baltimore was what?
That Kevin Stefanski's 3-hour run as the favorite in the search was short-lived because, I've done enough of these. I wasn't here. I came in McAdoo's first year. I wasn't there for that coaching search, but I covered the Shermer, the Judge, the Dable. This is my 4th coaching search in, like a little over maybe 10 years. So I'm pretty well versed. And the thing you kind of sometimes forget how quickly it actually happens though and how fluid this process is. Because obviously, we've known Dable's been out for a long time. You've known who the hot coordinators are or the Mike McCarthy's that aren't employed are. You didn't know who was going to shake free. And, I don't think Stefanski was a big surprise. Seemed like the type of guy who checks a lot of boxes. And then Harbaugh, like that Sunday night game, it felt like a lot was riding on that field goal at the end of that game. And if it goes one way, maybe we're talking about Mike Tomlin today. And instead, we're talking about John Harbaugh. And I think he just instantly vaults to the top of the Giants list. Now, probably every list that's out there right now, you've heard that he's got, I think his agent, it's up to 9 teams now have reached out. And there's, what is there, 6 openings? And, obviously not going to include Baltimore. So the math tells you he's a guy who's in demand. And I think absolutely for the Giants, number 1 on the list. They need someone like that to come in here. They've tried the first-time guys. They even tried a retread in Pat Shermer, not quite the same resume as John Harbaugh. They're chasing like that Tom Coughlin type of guy. And I think Harbaugh checks a ton of those boxes based on his resume and what he's done, just a long, successful run in Baltimore.
Yeah, if he were to be hired in, I think he would be the first Super Bowl winning head coach hired by the Giants, right? That he's won one prior.
That's true. Obviously, the guys came in and got there, won them. But I don't think they've ever hired someone who won a Super Bowl. And again, it's just there's an instant, gravitas he brings into the building. And this is a young roster. We can debate how talented it is, but there is definitely young talent. I think the biggest thing you heard was that leadership and accountability, those types of things are lacking. Nobody's going to come in and command the room quite like a John Harbaugh. You can just, look at the success I've had, look at the MVPs and the, everything he's done there. So players would instantly, have no choice but to fall in line to what he's going to run. And, again, he's proven that he is a program builder, all the buzzwords that you try to think, could this guy be that? You don't have to ask that question. You know it. He's done it. He's proven it.
Yeah, it's a big reason why I think part of the reason the job in Baltimore is so coveted is because of what he's established. A lot of it is going to be still there for you to just inherit and mold the way you want because of the success and sustained success that they had. You mentioned kind of the way he's wired, and I've been around him enough to know that, John has certain ways he wants things done. He's rather firm in a variety of things. The relationship that he could potentially have with Joe Schoen. Would he be one to come in and want to evaluate that? He doesn't seem like the type of coach, though, Dan, that would want to come in and just clean house. But it seems like something that people could possibly have their eye on. Joe. Right. I know Joe. What's your take on where that could possibly stand if this ends up being a marriage?
Yeah, listen, that's certainly an interesting wrinkle because, again, we knew Brian Dable was out for a long time. Joe Schoen's fate was the one that was sort of undecided, and obviously they announced on Monday he's back. It's not usually a good sign that 2 years in a row ownership had to put out a statement that you're retaining your job. I think that tells you sort of the state of things. Mm-hmm. Now, listen, he didn't even say if he got an extension, and nothing is binding at this point. If John Harbaugh comes in and his one and only criteria is like, I'll take the job if you fire Joe Schoen and bring in my preferred GM, there's no way they could say no to that. I'm sorry. Maybe you find a different role for Joe Schoen, whatever. There's just no way that you could let that be a roadblock to getting him in the building. But from, you say John. I don't really know him, obviously, just from afar. But from doing some quick research, talking to people who know him a lot better than I do, I don't necessarily think he would come in and be like, I'm going to strong arm Joe Schoen and take over, and he's got to go. I don't think it would come to that. But I also have heard he had a very strong voice in personnel in Baltimore. So he's going to come in and expect, obviously, that's any job he takes. He's not going to come in and just be a wallflower and let the GM run the show. And I think coming into this situation, it might always be advantageous. You don't have to push Joe Schoen out the door, but you're going to come in and your weight is going to automatically kind of outweigh him on I would think any close calls. I think Joe Schoen is probably going to be happy to have the job and would probably defer to him. So it might be an ideal situation in some ways, as much as you could look at Joe Schoen as a detriment. In this situation, it might help. And then listen, if after a year you go through a draft cycle, a free agency cycle, a season, we could certainly be sitting here a year from now talking about the Giants GM search and who from Baltimore or who from Harbaugh's past makes sense. But I would think just at the super early stage, I mean, he hasn't even interviewed for the Giants job, let alone met Joe Schoen as far as I don't think they have any pre-existing relationship. But you could easily see it playing out. He comes in, they'll make it work. And if it doesn't, then it's very easy to then move off from Joe Schoen next year. But I don't necessarily think it's going to be a Liam Cohen, Trent Baalke situation. But of course, we don't even know that because, again, they have to get in the room. But I would assume Joe Schoen, survival instincts would understand, like, I'm going to defer to the Super Bowl winning coach with the track record to be coming in.
Yeah, it's a really good point to bring up Trent Baalke and Liam Cohen. That the perception of that job actually changed very much right after there was a period of time that Trent Baalke was part of it, and then Shad Khan ends up moving on from Trent Baalke, and then and a lot of people I talked to around the league, the appearance of the job changed a little bit, and Liam Cohen slides in there. I think you could say maybe that's a thought with some people's minds in Cleveland as well with Andrew Berry. I think him and Joe Schoen are kind of in very similar boats in some instances, but then I also look at, I'm sitting here in Denver right now, and everybody thought that Sean Payton was going to push George Payton out the door after year one, and that has developed into an unbelievably good working relationship with both of them. And we know that Sean has a big say in terms of personnel and in terms of what he wants within that building. But, George has held his own in terms of getting themselves out of that Russell Wilson situation and developing the rest of that roster. I mentioned Russell Wilson. He was a quarterback there with the Giants. Yeah, there's just, you mentioned it being so early, and obviously Jackson Dart plays a part in this, and there's been early reports, I don't know specifically, but that John Harbaugh might like Jackson Dart. Is that a deal breaker in this search? Sometimes that's a conversation that happens during these interviews where, hey, Jackson Dart's our quarterback. What's your plan for him? Or are there other options if somebody comes in, say John Harbaugh or somebody else, and says, I like Jackson Dart. I don't know if I love him, but John Harbaugh loves this job. What would happen in that scenario? Because that one seems wild to me.
Right. I think if they had the number one pick, which was in their grasp, the last 2 weeks of the season, then I think that becomes a big topic, because then it's like, do you prefer Jackson Dart or any, Mendoza, any college quarterback, or the things you can do with that pick? Now that they're picking 5, I mean, the top quarterback's going to be off the board anyway. So I think Jackson Dart has certainly shown enough that you would feel comfortable if you're taking the job, rolling with him for a year or two. And then obviously you can reassess once you get in. And like you said, the early indications are that, Harbaugh is impressed by him. I mean, listen, Jackson Dart, it's hard not to be impressed. He had a very solid rookie year. There's promise there. I mean, obviously there's plenty of room for growth, but it certainly wasn't a situation like, oh man, I do not even want to go in there. It's not Josh Rosen or anything like that, a situation where I can't win with this kid. But I think, we talked about Joe Schoen and the GM situation. The quarterback thing probably is going to be a bigger factor for a coach like John Harbaugh when you're coming in, you're assessing, because he's going to have his pick of the litter. We just talked about how many teams are interested. So does he like the Giants situation headlined by Jackson Dart, or the Tennessee situation headlined by Cam Ward? Or, you start kind of looking around what the quarterback situations are. Like the Falcons, they might be far more appealing in some aspects, but then the quarterback situation is kind of a mess, or maybe he likes Michael Penix. These are all the things that are going to get worked out in the next couple of days when he starts actually meeting, having interviews. So I assume he'll make the rounds. I mean, this is his first time being in this position. Obviously, he was, first time head coach in Baltimore, was there for 18 years. He hasn't even gotten to do this whole wine and dine. And, I'm sure he might have some preliminary opinions, but, he's focused on being the Steelers and hopefully preparing for the AFC wildcard round this week. He did not think necessarily he'd be in this position. So I would assume he'll take his time, factor everything in. But yeah, I think Jackson Dart would be an appealing aspect of this job. I don't think it'll be a detriment. Again, if they the number one pick, it would be a lot, maybe of a juicier supply. I think picking 5, you're going to run it back with him. And I think any coach who comes in, I think would be, content to sign up for that.
That's a good point. Really good point. You mentioned you were, planning on writing something on Kevin Stefanski, planning on following, Kev during a certain direction, and possibly him being the leading candidate. Then John Harbaugh comes in. Let's not just disregard Kevin Stefanski, a 2-time coach of the year. How would his fit potentially be? Knowing that locker room and knowing what players are looking for, how would you think Kevin Stefanski's demeanor would fit that room and the city?
Yeah, I think he is a very strong plan B at this point. Because again, I think all the eggs are going to go in the Harbaugh basket. Yeah. You're going to exhaust that avenue, and if it doesn't work out, because again, for the 3 hours or whatever the gap was before you found out that Harbaugh can be available, and that Stefanski was going to be coming for an interview, I think a lot of people were interested. Maybe not the same excitement. He didn't win Super Bowls, but he was in Cleveland and he got to the playoffs a couple of times. Like you said, he won a couple of Coach of the Year awards there. So no, I think he absolutely checks a lot of the boxes there. I think the previous head coaching experience is a thing where it doesn't always guarantee success. But when you're just coming from where the Giants are right now, where they've really bottomed out, there is just something to be said for a guy who's coached 100 games in the NFL. And you at least know there's a level of stability and competency in the role. Chris Shula, Jesse Minter, they might be the next great superstar coach, and you'd love to get in on the ground floor in that. But they also might be the next guy who's just overwhelmed and, you set your franchise back. I think that they want to just kind of put this one in the fairway as far as a hire goes. And now obviously Harbaugh will be more than just doing that. I think Stefanski probably fits the put in the fairway. Maybe you're not going to win a Super Bowl with him, but you're also probably not going to be, just kind of a embarrassing mess or, for lack of a better way to put it. But yeah, and I think the offensive background, that probably helps again, because I think a lot of what they do is going to be, what's your plan for developing Jackson Dart? We've seen promise. How do you get him to the next level? And it's funny with Harbaugh not being an offensive guy, he can point to the couple of MVP trophies that Lamar Jackson won with different coordinators and stuff. Like, I'll figure that out. Don't worry about it. So that's not a big hurdle for him to overcome, not being an offensive guy. Whereas Stefanski, directly he can say, listen, I didn't have the greatest quarterback situation, but when I even had competent quarterback play in Cleveland, we won and had some success.
Yeah, really good point. I'm fascinated always to see what somebody that is respected, when I talk to people around the league, the way Kevin Stefanski is, going, okay, here's a young, talented quarterback, say Jackson Dart. Have at it, Kevin, as opposed to what you've been dealing with in Cleveland. Before you go, Dan, I'm kind of curious, has the time benefited the Giants with as early as they parted ways with Brian Daboll and being around the organization and inside the building as much as you are from when Daboll left and departed to now? Has that time period benefited the Giants in any sense?
It's interesting because, Joe Schoen was asked a question like that on Monday, and he indicated ahead that, I think comparing it to when he did the first search, he had been the assistant GM in Buffalo. You're going through your own GM interviews, gets the job with the Giants, and then you got to turn around and make a head coaching hire. So you can understand that that's a pretty hectic process and timeline. Whereas this, you fired Daboll, it's 7 weeks ago in the season. You have all that runway is the word he used to do your research on candidates. So I think that part definitely helps. At the same time, it's a fast and furious process. So all that background work you did on Jeff Hafley in November, it doesn't really make that much of a difference when you got to somehow sell John Harbaugh, who you had no idea. You might have had an inkling he could be available, but you didn't know he'd be available. Even Kevin Stefanski, you didn't know he'd be available. So again, I keep using that word fluid because again, being through this process so many times, I can remember when they hired Joe Judge and everyone was waiting for Matt Rule. That was the golden goose they're going to land, and they couldn't get him on the plane and leave David Tepper's house, when he went to Charlotte. So you have to be able to pivot in these types of searches. So yeah, again, I think it helped that they're not under the gun like you would have been, Shane's first go around. And obviously he brought Daboll with him from Buffalo. So there's a high comfort level here. He's been able to cast a wider net, even just probably in the preliminary stuff where maybe you do more background and rule some guys out. But then again, you just never know who's going to enter the fray. And we got wildcard weekend here. Who's to say everything is settled? There could be some guys getting bounced that, have an early exit this weekend, and that might make more competition for Harbaugh. So again, it's such a crazy time. And so I think that runway helped, but now now you're down to brass tacks, and now you got to be able to be nimble enough to make moves and outfox teams. You got to get your interview order, ahead of other teams, whatever it may be. All of that, I don't think there's any preparation that can help you, but it certainly didn't hurt, I think, to have that 7 week runway. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I never thought of it from the adverse side of things of, we could rule people out during this process. That's a really, really good point. Okay, I'll let you get back to it because you said time is of the essence. Get working on John Harbaugh, maybe Mike Tomlin next week. Who knows? Everybody should have an interest in this Giants job that to me seems very still appealing, right up there with the Ravens ahead of the rest of the group. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, anytime. Appreciate it.
I love when we get all these different perspectives from all these different voices that are so plugged in across the NFL. Obviously, the number one right there is our senior NFL insider, Dianna Russini. Outstanding information at the top of the show about everything that's going on with John Harbaugh and across the NFL. Jeff Zrebiec taking us inside that Ravens locker room and facility. And then Dan Duggan also talking about everything that happens with that Giants team and where they could be going in this search. Just dynamite type of information there. Also, we'll do our normal Thursday road trip around the NFL tomorrow. Keep an eye on that because we have a wide open NFL postseason. As it was taught to me by someone around the league, an executive, this is the year. This is the year that you want to be in the postseason because anybody can get to the Super Bowl. We'll break it all down tomorrow on Scoop City. Take it easy.
Thanks for watching Scoop City. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment. New episodes of Scoop City drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.